You know how your mom always told you to wear a clean pair of underwear in case you get in an accident? Well, my take on that story or that advice is don't be doing something stupid in case you get rushed to the emergency room. That was me 6 years ago this month when, late on a Friday night, my wife, who was 8 months pregnant at the time, had to help carry me into the emergency room at the Bethesda Naval Hospital. And once you get there, you're going to be subjected to a series of questions about how and where and when. And so the admitting nurse said to me, she said, on a scale of 1 to 10, how strong is the pain? And she has a little sign behind her with smiley faces and frowny faces going from 1 to 10. In case you can't say it, you can point to one of them. As I'm clutching my abdomen and in a cold sweat, I sort of am able to meek out a 8. And then she says, and how long ago did you start feeling the pain? And I say, about 6 hours ago. And then she says, and where were you when you first felt the pain? Were you doing anything unusual? And that's where it got tricky. So the truth of the matter is, I was at a strip club, out with the boys on a Friday night for a happy hour. And at that very moment, when I first felt that stabbing pain in my abdomen, I had a dollar bill nicely folded up and putting it into the garter of one of the performers. And that's when I about doubled over in pain. But I looked at my wife, I looked at the smiley chart and the pain symbols and thinking about my abdomen might not be the only pain I'm feeling tonight. And I was thinking about what to do, and I heard, sir, were you doing anything unusual at the time? No, not really. I thought that was an okay response given the environment I was in. It probably really wasn't that unusual. But that was just the beginning. The questions persisted. First with the admitting nurse, then the triage nurse, then the intern, then the resident. And with each one, as my pain didn't subside and got stronger and stronger, my will to sort of disguise where I really was weakened and weakened. At one point, one of the doctors asked me where I was and when I first felt the pain. And so I sort of came clean, and I said, well, I was out with some college buddies that were in town. We went to a happy hour. There was this gentleman's club, and we could get in without a cover charge because it was early enough in the evening. And we had a couple drinks, and then I felt this pain, and so I really wasn't even having fun. My wife kind of looked at me. She didn't say anything. She didn't really have to. She sort of had that look that was, we'll talk about this when we get home. And then to really rub it in, all she had to do was just sort of look down and caress her belly. Somewhere in all this, the doctors promised me some morphine for the pain. But they weren't sure what it was, and somewhere the nurse never showed up with it. And so the pain just continued and continued and just got worse and worse. Finally, the on-call surgeon came in to talk to me. And by this point, I just want to curl up in a fetal position on the floor. And before he can even ask the questions about my symptoms and where I was and what I was doing, I just blurted out. I just say, strip club, front row seat, awesome pole dance, $5 tip, doubled over in pain. I exaggerated a little, it was only $1, but I didn't want to look cheap in front of another guy. The interesting thing was, this really was a pretty innocent night. I was home by 8 o'clock that night. See, my wife and I had a dinner we had to go to, and it was a dinner that neither one of us really wanted to be at. It was with the neighbors. We'd gotten into this disagreement with the neighbors, and they had now invited us over for a dinner, and this was sort of a makeup dinner, and it was just going to be awkward. So by 7:30 that night, I was saying goodbye to my friends. I was leaving the strip club. I was on the metro heading home to Bethesda. Now, when I was in the strip club, although I was feeling the pain, there was some distractions, and so I wasn't really aware of it. But by the time I'm on the metro riding home, all I can think about is this sharp pain in my abdomen and thinking that I must have eaten some bad food at lunch or something, but don't know what it is. And I get off the metro, and my wife's there to pick me up, and I get in the passenger seat, and I turn to her, and I just say, I do not feel well at all. And she turns back at me and she says, you're not getting out of this dinner. So we made it through the dinner. I didn't eat anything, which made it even more awkward. We got home, we went to bed, and my wife touched my skin, and she just said, "You're on fire." And she said, we're going to the hospital. And I insisted, no, it's just stomach cramps, or it's food poisoning, or it's something, and I'll be fine in the morning. But there she was, carrying me into the emergency room late that Friday night, insisting that I go. And so that's how I came to, on that night, be figuratively spilling my guts to the doctors and nurses and my wife, and as it turns out, literally doing the same as I was getting prepped for an operation in the middle of the night. I thought I needed to call someone and tell someone, so I called my mom, and she lives in Colorado, so it's 2 hours earlier there, so it was about 4 o'clock in the morning when her phone rang, and I told her, I said, "Mom, I'm in the hospital." And she was concerned. Of course, it's no good news comes that early in the morning. And she said, "What's wrong?" And I told her, I said, "Well, it's my appendix, and they're going to remove it." And she just laughed. And she said, "Oh, I thought it was something serious." And she said, "Call me when you're out of the hospital." But this was serious, because in fact my appendix had ruptured, and if any of that toxin gets into your system, it can kill you. And so they did the operation, they removed the appendix, and now for the next 3 days I was required to stay at the hospital. They wouldn't discharge me. I had to stay at the hospital for the next 3 days, pumped up on super antibiotics to make sure that they prevented any kind of infection in case anything leaked into me. And when you're at the Bethesda Naval Hospital in the recovery ward, it's known as Ward 5, and that's also the ward where all the Marines from Iraq and Afghanistan are recovering. And so for the next 3 days, it was me and the Marines in Ward 5, and I had this time to get to know them and get to hear their stories. And all their stories were pretty similar. All of them involved something like an IED, an improvised explosive device, or getting caught in a firefight. All of them were disfigured in some way, maybe missing an arm or a leg, or scars. None of them were bitter. In fact, they were all very hard on themselves. They felt like they had let their teammates down because they were here in the hospital and their teammates were still over there fighting. And all of their stories ended the same way. After they'd tell me the story, and I was just in awe that they could tell it so matter-of-factly, they would turn to me and they'd say, "So what happened to you?" And I had to look them in the eye and say, "I had a really bad tummy ache and my wife rushed me to the hospital." A month later, ironically, I was rushing my wife to the hospital. And as we were in the admitting room and the nurse was asking her questions about how strong are the contractions and when did you first start feeling the pain, I had this stroke of inspiration and I thought, wow, I really know what she's going through. And I told her that. I said, but she wasn't amused. Luckily, she forgave me, but I'm hoping that my friends from that Friday night have the same forgiveness, because I swore to myself I was never going to tell this story with anybody, but after tonight, I think their wives are about to find out where they were too. Thank you.